They thought the pressure would break you. They thought the betrayal, the delay, the silent battles in the middle of the night would cause you to surrender your purpose. But this Sunday, something is shifting in the spirit realm. Every attack assigned against your peace, your family, your health, your finances, and your destiny is about to encounter the power of prayer. What the enemy whispered would destroy you will become the very testimony that proves God has been protecting you all along. There are battles that cannot be fought with human strength alone. Some attacks are spiritual, invisible, calculated, and designed to drain your faith before your breakthrough arrives. But today is not a day of fear, it is a day of warfare. This is the moment to rise with authority, to break every chain of anxiety, confusion, oppression, and limitation. No curse, no evil word, no spiritual resistance has the final say over your life when heaven begins to move on your behalf. Before this prayer ends, expect atmospheres to change. Expect burdens to lift. Expect doors that were locked for months to suddenly open. Because when you begin to pray with power, darkness cannot remain comfortable around you. This Sunday warfare prayer is not just another message. It is a declaration that every spiritual attack formed against your life will be confronted, dismantled, and defeated in the mighty name of Jesus. There are moments in life when the attacks against you cannot be explained by logic alone. You pray, you work hard, you stay faithful, yet resistance keeps appearing from every direction. Doors close without warning. Relationships shift unexpectedly. Peace disappears for no reason. Sleep becomes difficult. Fear tries to settle into your spirit. It feels as if something unseen is fighting against your progress. These are the moments when you must recognize that not every battle is natural. Some battles are spiritual, hidden beneath the surface, operating silently while attempting to weaken your faith, your confidence, and your connection to God. The enemy often works through invisible pressure. The attack may not come with obvious signs at first. It begins with discouragement, confusion, heaviness, distraction, delay, and emotional exhaustion. Little by little, the enemy attempts to wear down your spirit until you stop praying, stop believing, and stop expecting victory. Hidden attacks are dangerous because they are designed to go unnoticed. If the enemy can keep you distracted by visible problems, you may never recognize the spiritual source behind the struggle. That is why spiritual discernment is necessary in this season. There are people listening right now who have been under spiritual attack for months, maybe even years. You have felt isolated even in crowded rooms. You have carried burdens nobody else could see. There were moments when you smiled in public but cried in private. There were nights when your mind would not rest. Thoughts of fear, failure, and hopelessness tried to surround you. Every time you attempted to move forward, something unexpected pushed you backward again. These hidden attacks were never random. The enemy targeted your purpose because he recognized the potential attached to your life. The enemy does not waste energy attacking people who have no purpose. Spiritual warfare intensifies when destiny is involved. When God has placed greatness inside of you, resistance often increases. The enemy studies patterns. He looks for moments of weakness, exhaustion, disappointment, and offense. He tries to enter through fear, bitterness, unforgiveness, and discouragement. That is why you cannot afford to remain spiritually asleep. You must stay alert in prayer because hidden attacks often begin in unseen places before they manifest in visible ways. Some attacks are aimed at your peace. Others are aimed at your confidence. Some are directed at your finances, your health, your relationships, or your calling. The enemy understands that if he can attack your mind long enough, eventually he hopes your actions will follow your thoughts. He wants you to doubt yourself. He wants you to question God's promises. He wants you to become so emotionally drained that you stop fighting altogether. But today, the spirit of defeat is being broken off your life. You were not created to live under constant oppression. You were not designed to spend your life trapped in fear and anxiety. God did not bring you this far just to abandon you in the middle of the battle. Even now, while unseen attacks have tried to rise against you, heaven has been protecting you in ways you cannot fully understand. There were dangers you never saw. There were traps the enemy prepared that never succeeded because the hand of God was covering you. The fact that you are still standing is proof that divine protection has remained over your life. Hidden attacks often create cycles. You may notice repeated struggles appearing in different seasons. The names change, the circumstances change, but the pattern remains familiar. Repeated disappointment, repeated delay, repeated emotional warfare, repeated confusion. This is why spiritual warfare requires spiritual authority. You cannot defeat spiritual attacks using natural strength alone. Prayer becomes your weapon. Faith becomes your shield. The Word of God becomes your foundation. Worship becomes your atmosphere of victory. There are times when people misunderstand spiritual warfare because they focus only on physical evidence. But spiritual battles are often revealed through patterns, atmospheres, and persistent resistance. You walk into certain environments and immediately feel heaviness. You attempt to pray and suddenly distractions increase. You begin pursuing purpose and unexpected opposition appears from every side. These moments require spiritual sensitivity because not every battle is merely coincidence. The enemy fears people who understand their authority. Once you recognize the power of prayer, fear begins to lose its control over your life. Hidden attacks survive in darkness, but prayer exposes what the enemy wanted concealed. The moment you begin to pray with boldness, chains begin to break, oppression begins to weaken, confusion begins to lift. Spiritual warfare is not about panic. It is about authority. It is about standing firmly on God's promises, even when circumstances attempt to intimidate you. Many people surrender too early because they interpret resistance as abandonment. But resistance is not proof that God has left you. Often, resistance is evidence that you are moving closer to breakthrough. The enemy fights hardest against people who are about to step into a new season. He wants you exhausted before the door opens. He wants you offended before restoration arrives. He wants you distracted before purpose manifests. But every hidden attack assigned against your future is losing power as you continue to stand in faith. Some of the strongest attacks happen in the mind. Negative thoughts become repeated patterns. Fearful imaginations grow stronger at night. Doubt whispers constantly. The enemy understands that the battlefield of the mind is critical because thoughts influence decisions. That is why you must guard your mind carefully. You cannot feed your spirit with fear and expect to walk in victory. You cannot constantly agree with hopelessness and expect peace to remain. Every day you must make the decision to reject fear and align your thinking with God's truth. Spiritual attacks also attempt to isolate people. Isolation weakens spiritual strength because the enemy wants you disconnected from encouragement, wisdom, and accountability. He wants you to believe you are alone in your struggle. But isolation is one of his oldest strategies. God never intended for you to fight every battle without support. Even in difficult seasons, heaven is aware of your struggle. God sees every tear, every prayer, every silent battle, and every moment you felt like giving up. There are hidden attacks operating against families right now. Misunderstanding, division, anger, and emotional distance attempt to destroy unity within homes. The enemy knows that divided families become vulnerable to deeper attacks. That is why prayer over your household matters. You must cover your family spiritually. You must pray over your children, your marriage, your relationships, and your future. Never underestimate the power of consistent prayer inside your home. The enemy also attacks identity. If he can convince you that you are weak, forgotten, unqualified, or defeated, he can limit your effectiveness. But your identity is not determined by your struggle. Your identity is determined by God's purpose for your life. You are not powerless. You are not abandoned. You are not destined for destruction. The attacks against you may be intense, but they are not greater than the authority God has placed within you. Every hidden attack working against your peace is being exposed. Every spirit of fear attempting to control your thoughts is losing authority. Every assignment sent to weaken your faith is being broken. The pressure may have been intense, but it will not define your future. What tried to silence your voice will not succeed. What tried to delay your purpose will not prevail. What tried to destroy your confidence will not have the final word. There are chains that cannot be seen with natural eyes, yet they affect every area of a person's life. Some people are physically free but spiritually bound. They wake up every day carrying fear they cannot explain, heaviness they cannot shake, and oppression that follows them from one season into another. Fear has a way of entering quietly. It begins with worry, uncertainty, disappointment, and repeated battles that slowly weaken confidence. Over time, fear attempts to build a prison inside the mind, convincing people they will never overcome the struggles standing in front of them. Oppression works in a similar way. It presses against the spirit continuously, creating emotional exhaustion and spiritual heaviness. It drains motivation. It steals joy. It causes people to feel trapped inside cycles they cannot escape. Some people have lived under oppression for so long that they no longer remember what true peace feels like. They have adjusted to surviving instead of living with freedom. They smile in public while carrying silent torment in private. They pray but still feel surrounded by pressure. They worship while fighting battles nobody else can see. The enemy uses fear because fear weakens faith. Fear causes hesitation, doubt, and paralysis. It keeps people from stepping into purpose. It convinces them to remain small, silent, and defeated. Fear whispers that failure is inevitable. Fear magnifies problems while minimizing God's promises. Fear causes people to focus more on the storm than on the power of the one who controls the storm. The enemy understands that if fear dominates your thoughts, it will eventually influence your decisions, your actions, and your future. There are people listening right now who have spent years battling fear internally. Fear of rejection, fear of loss, fear of failure, fear of sickness, fear of the future, fear of not being enough. Fear becomes exhausting because it constantly creates imaginary battles before anything even happens. The mind becomes overwhelmed with possibilities, worst-case scenarios, and negative outcomes. Peace disappears because fear keeps the spirit in a state of constant tension. Oppression often follows seasons of disappointment and trauma. After repeated pain, the enemy attempts to convince people that breakthrough will never come. He uses delay to create discouragement. He uses betrayal to create distrust. He uses failure to create insecurity. Little by little, oppression settles over the heart like a heavy cloud. People begin to lose passion, expectation, and hope. They continue moving through life, but inwardly they feel drained and disconnected. The dangerous thing about oppression is that it often hides behind normal behavior. A person may continue working, smiling, and functioning while privately carrying deep spiritual heaviness. They may not even realize how much pressure they are under until they finally experience freedom. Oppression convinces people that exhaustion is normal, anxiety is permanent, and emotional heaviness is simply part of life. But God never intended for his people to live under constant spiritual bondage. Fear and oppression are chains that attempt to limit destiny. The enemy does not attack randomly. He studies potential. He attacks people who carry purpose, calling, influence, and spiritual authority. He fears what could happen if you fully recognize who you are in God. That is why he works so aggressively to keep people trapped in intimidation and discouragement. If he can keep you afraid, he can keep you silent. If he can keep you oppressed, he can keep you distracted from your assignment. There are moments when fear becomes so intense that people begin doubting themselves completely. They stop trusting their ability to move forward. They second-guess every decision. They avoid opportunities because fear convinces them they are unprepared. But fear is a liar. It creates illusions designed to make mountains appear larger than they truly are. Fear exaggerates obstacles while ignoring the power of God working behind the scenes. Oppression also attacks the ability to pray effectively. Many people under spiritual heaviness struggle to focus during prayer because their minds feel overwhelmed. They begin praying, but quickly become distracted, discouraged, or emotionally exhausted. The enemy understands the power of prayer, so he fights hard to weaken spiritual consistency. He knows that prayer breaks chains. Prayer shifts atmospheres. Prayer destroys strongholds that have operated for years. Some chains are connected to past experiences. Words spoken over your life years ago may still be influencing your confidence today. Rejection from childhood may still be affecting how you see yourself. Trauma may still be shaping your expectations. The enemy often uses old wounds to maintain present bondage. He reminds people of their failures repeatedly because he wants them to believe their past disqualifies them from freedom. But your history does not determine your destiny. There are people who have become so familiar with fear that they no longer recognize how deeply it controls them. Fear influences their relationships, their choices, their conversations, and even their prayers. They expect disappointment before opportunities even begin. They prepare for failure before trying. They avoid risk because fear has convinced them that protection is safer than purpose. But living imprisoned by fear is not true safety. Fear keeps people alive physically while preventing them from fully living spiritually. Oppression also thrives in isolation. The enemy wants people disconnected from encouragement and spiritual support. Isolation creates vulnerability because thoughts grow louder when there is no truth speaking against them. That is why many attacks intensify in private moments. The enemy wants people alone with their fears, alone with their doubts, and alone with their discouragement. But God did not create you to fight every battle in silence. Breaking chains requires spiritual authority. Freedom begins when a person refuses to agree with the lies of fear any longer. The enemy gains strength when people accept hopelessness as truth. But the moment you begin declaring God's promises over your life, chains begin weakening. Every prayer spoken in faith pushes back against darkness. Every act of worship shifts the atmosphere around you. Every moment of obedience weakens the enemy's grip. Fear often tells people to stay quiet, but freedom requires boldness. There comes a moment when you must decide that enough is enough. Enough fear controlling your future. Enough anxiety controlling your peace. Enough oppression draining your strength. Enough insecurity limiting your purpose. Chains remain strong when they are tolerated, but they begin breaking when spiritual authority rises. The enemy wants you emotionally exhausted because exhausted people struggle to fight effectively. He uses constant pressure, hoping you will eventually surrender your confidence and expectation. But pressure does not mean defeat. Resistance does not mean abandonment. Some of the strongest people are those who continued praying while carrying battles nobody else understood. There are spiritual chains attached to negative thinking patterns that have repeated for years. Some people automatically expect failure because disappointment has become familiar. Others struggle to receive love because rejection shaped their identity. Some battle constant anxiety because fear has controlled their imagination for too long, but these patterns can be broken. What has existed for years can lose power in a single moment of spiritual breakthrough. The voice of fear grows weaker when the voice of faith becomes stronger. Every time you choose prayer over panic, faith grows. Every time you choose worship instead of worry, strength increases. Every time you reject hopelessness and stand on God's promises, chains begin falling apart. The enemy cannot permanently hold captive someone who continues seeking God with determination. Oppression loses power when light enters dark places. The enemy thrives in secrecy, silence, and hopelessness. But when truth is spoken boldly, darkness begins retreating. Fear may have followed you for years, but it will not define the rest of your life. Oppression may have weighed heavily on your spirit, but it is not stronger than the power of God working within you. Every chain attached to fear is being challenged. Every spirit of intimidation trying to silence your voice is losing authority. Every oppressive burden attempting to drain your strength is being lifted. The heaviness that followed you into this season will not remain forever. The anxiety that tried to control your thoughts will not have permanent dominion over your mind. The pressure that attempted to weaken your spirit is meeting the power of prayer and the authority of God. There is a protection that goes beyond human understanding. It cannot always be seen, measured, or explained naturally, yet it surrounds those whom God is watching over. Many people only recognize protection after danger has already passed. They look back and realize certain situations should have destroyed them, certain accidents should have happened, certain attacks should have succeeded, yet somehow they survived. That was not luck. That was not coincidence. That was the hand of God preserving life, purpose, and destiny, even in moments when danger was close. Every day there are battles happening, both seen and unseen. Some dangers are physical, while others are spiritual. The enemy constantly looks for opportunities to create destruction, confusion, division, fear, and discouragement. He targets individuals, marriages, children, families, finances, health, and peace of mind. His mission is to weaken people emotionally and spiritually until they begin to live in constant fear. But divine protection creates a shield around those who trust in God. Even when attacks arise, there is a covering that prevents the enemy from fully accomplishing his plans. Many people underestimate how much protection they have already experienced. There were moments when a delayed appointment saved you from danger. There were situations where people walked away from your life because God removed them before they could harm your future. There were opportunities that seemed disappointing when they failed, only for you to later realize rejection protected you from destruction. God's protection does not always look comfortable in the moment, but it is always working with purpose. There are people listening right now who have survived seasons they thought would break them completely. You endured emotional attacks, financial struggles, betrayal, sickness, disappointment, and spiritual warfare. There were nights when fear tried to convince you that you would not make it through the situation standing before you. Yet despite all the pressure, you are still standing. You are still breathing. You are still moving forward. That is evidence that divine protection has remained over your life, even during the hardest battles. The enemy often attacks families because families carry generational influence. He knows that strong families create stability, strength, and spiritual legacy. That is why division, conflict, misunderstanding, and emotional distance are common areas of attack. The enemy wants homes filled with tension instead of peace. He wants communication broken. He wants relationships damaged. He wants fear and confusion operating inside households. But when God's protection covers a family, attacks lose their power to permanently destroy what heaven is guarding. Parents carry a responsibility to spiritually cover their children. Children face battles many adults do not fully understand. They encounter pressure, temptation, fear, confusion, and influences that attempt to shape their identity away from truth. Prayer over children matters deeply because spiritual attacks often begin subtly. The enemy targets identity early because he understands that confused identity leads to weakened purpose later in life. But divine protection can preserve children even in hostile environments. There are attacks that try to enter through fear. Fear weakens discernment and causes people to operate emotionally instead of spiritually. When fear dominates the mind, peace becomes difficult to maintain. That is why protecting your mind is essential. Not every thought deserves agreement. Not every voice deserves influence. The enemy constantly attempts to plant doubt, anxiety, insecurity, and hopelessness within the mind because he knows thoughts shape actions. But God's protection extends even into the mental battles people face daily. Many people have experienced seasons where it felt as though attack after attack kept appearing without relief. One problem would end and another would begin immediately afterward. The pressure felt relentless. Yet even in those moments, God was limiting what the enemy could do. There are attacks that never fully formed because divine protection stopped them before they reached you. There are plans against your life that failed because heaven intervened before destruction could unfold. Divine protection does not mean the absence of battles. It means you are not fighting those battles alone. Some people assume that if they experience difficulty, God must have abandoned them. But often the opposite is true. Sometimes protection is the reason you survive the battle at all. God never promised a life without warfare, but he promised his presence in the middle of the warfare. His protection remains active even when circumstances appear chaotic. The enemy studies weakness, exhaustion, and emotional vulnerability. He looks for moments when people are discouraged, distracted, offended, or spiritually disconnected. That is why prayer must remain consistent. Prayer strengthens spiritual awareness and keeps people aligned with God's covering. A prayerless life becomes vulnerable because spiritual sensitivity weakens without connection to God. But people who stay rooted in prayer often recognize danger before it fully manifests. There are times when divine protection appears through discernment. You feel unsettled about a decision. Something inside warns you not to move forward. You cannot fully explain it logically, yet deep within your spirit, you sense caution. Many people ignore these moments, but spiritual discernment is often part of God's protective guidance. He sees dangers that human eyes cannot see. He understands consequences before events unfold. His protection operates with wisdom far beyond human understanding. Families today face enormous spiritual pressure. The enemy attacks unity because unity carries power. He attacks communication because misunderstanding creates division. He attacks peace because chaotic homes become emotionally exhausting environments. But households covered in prayer become spiritually strengthened. Homes filled with worship, faith, and consistent prayer create atmospheres where fear struggles to dominate. There are also financial attacks that attempt to create instability and fear within families. Financial pressure can produce stress, conflict, anxiety, and hopelessness if left unchecked spiritually. The enemy often uses financial struggles to distract people from faith and push them toward despair. But divine protection includes provision, wisdom, and preservation during difficult seasons. Many people survived impossible financial situations because God sustained them even when resources appeared limited. Health attacks also become major battlegrounds. Sickness, exhaustion, and physical weakness can affect not only the body, but also the mind and spirit. Long battles with health challenges often create emotional fatigue and discouragement. The enemy attempts to use suffering to weaken faith and create hopelessness. But God's protection covers both physical and spiritual strength. Even during illness, his presence remains near. The enemy especially fears families that pray together because united prayer creates spiritual strength. A family aligned spiritually becomes difficult to divide. Prayer invites God's presence into the home and pushes back against darkness, trying to operate within relationships. Even simple moments of prayer create protection over conversations, decisions, emotions, and future generations. There are generational attacks that attempt to repeat destructive patterns from one generation to the next. Cycles of fear, addiction, broken relationships, anger, poverty, and emotional dysfunction often continue because spiritual roots remain unaddressed. But divine protection can interrupt destructive cycles. What affected previous generations does not have to control the future of your family. Many people carry testimonies they rarely speak about publicly. Moments where death came close but did not succeed. Moments where tragedy almost happened but somehow was avoided. Moments where they felt overwhelmed but still survived. These are reminders that God's protection often operates quietly. Not every miracle happens loudly. Some miracles happen through preservation. The enemy wants families living in fear of the future, but fear is not greater than God's protection. Even in uncertain times, divine covering remains active. Nations may experience instability, economies may shift, relationships may face pressure, and spiritual battles may intensify, but God is still able to preserve those who trust Him. His protection is not limited by circumstances, systems, or human weakness. There are unseen battles happening around your life right now that you may never fully understand. Yet angels are moving, prayers are working, and heaven is responding. The enemy may attempt attacks, but he does not have unlimited authority. God remains sovereign over every situation. What the enemy planned for destruction can be turned into testimony through divine intervention. Every attack against your peace is meeting resistance from heaven. Every assignment sent against your family is being confronted. Every hidden danger surrounding your future is being exposed and blocked. Every fear trying to enter your home is losing power. Divine protection is covering your life, your family, your purpose, your health, your mind, and your future, even in seasons where battles feel intense. There is power released when prayer moves beyond routine words and becomes a spiritual force fueled by faith, authority, and expectation. Many people pray casually, repeating familiar phrases without fully realizing the authority available to them through God. But powerful prayer changes atmospheres. It shifts spiritual conditions. It breaks chains that seemed unmovable. It confronts darkness directly and releases heaven's influence into earthly situations. Prayer is not weakness. Prayer is warfare. Prayer is alignment with divine authority that reaches beyond human limitations. The enemy fears people who understand the power of prayer because prayer destroys the illusion that darkness is in control. Every time a person prays with genuine faith, spiritual movement begins taking place even if physical evidence has not appeared yet. Many battles are won spiritually before they become visible naturally. That is why the enemy works so hard to discourage consistent prayer. He uses distraction, exhaustion, doubt, and disappointment because he understands that a praying person becomes dangerous to the kingdom of darkness. There are people who have spent years depending only on natural solutions while ignoring spiritual authority. They fight emotional battles without prayer. They battle fear without prayer. They struggle through family problems without prayer. They face financial pressure without prayer. Yet many of these battles cannot be resolved by human effort alone because spiritual resistance is involved. Prayer invites God's power into situations where human strength has reached its limit. Victory through prayer begins with understanding authority. Too many people approach prayer from a position of fear instead of confidence. They beg as though God is distant, uncertain, or unwilling to respond. But prayer rooted in faith recognizes that God hears, sees, and responds to those who seek Him sincerely. Spiritual authority does not come from human perfection. It comes from alignment with God's power and promises. When you pray in faith, you are not speaking empty words into the air. You are releasing spiritual authority against every force working against your peace, purpose, and destiny. The enemy often attempts to convince people that prayer is ineffective because results are not always immediate. Delays create discouragement. Unanswered questions create frustration. Repeated battles create emotional exhaustion. But powerful prayer is not measured only by what can be seen instantly. Sometimes prayer is protecting you from dangers you never recognize. Sometimes prayer is delaying destruction while preparing breakthrough. Sometimes prayer is strengthening you internally before circumstances change externally. There are spiritual strongholds that remain in place because people stop praying before breakthrough arrives. The enemy wants believers to become impatient, distracted, and spiritually passive. He wants them to pray once and then surrender when circumstances do not immediately improve. But persistent prayer weakens resistance over time. Every prayer spoken in faith applies pressure against darkness. Every act of worship shifts the atmosphere surrounding your life. Every declaration of truth confronts the lies of the enemy. Many people underestimate how much spiritual authority they already possess. Fear causes them to remain silent when they should be praying boldly. They focus more on their weakness than on God's strength. But throughout Scripture, ordinary people experienced extraordinary victory through prayer. Prayer closed the mouths of lions. Prayer opened prison doors. Prayer defeated armies. Prayer brought healing, restoration, wisdom, and supernatural provision. The same God who responded then still responds today. Powerful prayer requires spiritual focus. The enemy thrives in distraction because distracted people struggle to remain spiritually effective. Many people attempt to pray while their minds remain consumed with fear, stress, entertainment, and emotional chaos. Their spirit desires breakthrough, but their attention remains divided. That is why spiritual discipline matters. Prayer deepens when people intentionally separate themselves from constant noise and focus completely on God's presence. Victory through prayer also requires faith during invisible seasons. One of the greatest challenges in spiritual warfare is continuing to believe while nothing appears to be changing. The enemy uses silence to create doubt. He whispers that your prayers are pointless. He tells you nothing is happening. But spiritual movement often begins long before visible evidence appears. Seeds planted underground are still growing even when they cannot yet be seen above the surface. The enemy attacks consistency because consistent prayer creates spiritual momentum. A person who prays occasionally may experience moments of encouragement, but a person who develops a lifestyle of prayer builds spiritual endurance and authority. Daily prayer strengthens discernment. It sharpens spiritual sensitivity. It increases peace even during difficult seasons. Prayer trains the heart to depend on God instead of fear. There are battles people carry privately that only prayer can fully address. Some struggles are too deep for human advice alone. Emotional wounds, spiritual oppression, fear, anxiety, bitterness, addiction, and hopelessness often require spiritual breakthrough that only God can provide. Prayer reaches places human strength cannot reach. It heals wounds hidden beneath years of pain. It restores peace where chaos once dominated. It renews strength where exhaustion tried to settle permanently. Many people pray only during emergencies. They seek God intensely during crisis but drift away once pressure decreases. Yet powerful prayer is not meant to be reserved only for difficult moments. Prayer creates relationship, alignment, and spiritual strength before battles even arrive. People who pray consistently often recognize attacks earlier because spiritual awareness increases through intimacy with God. The enemy especially fears united prayer. When believers pray together in agreement, spiritual strength multiplies. Unity disrupts the enemy's strategy because division weakens spiritual effectiveness. That is why the enemy constantly works to create offense, misunderstanding, pride, and conflict among people of faith. He understands that divided people struggle to pray with authority together, but united prayer releases powerful spiritual movement that pushes back darkness. There are times when prayer becomes warfare against generational struggles. Some families battle repeated cycles of fear, addiction, poverty, broken relationships, anger, or emotional dysfunction. These patterns often continue because nobody confronts them spiritually. But prayer can break cycles that existed for generations. Spiritual authority can interrupt patterns that seem permanent. Prayer also transforms the person praying. Many people begin praying for circumstances to change, only to discover that God first changes them internally. Prayer develops patience, wisdom, humility, courage, and spiritual maturity. It teaches dependence on God instead of self-sufficiency. It shifts focus away from panic and toward faith. The more time people spend in prayer, the stronger they often become spiritually and emotionally. The enemy wants prayer to feel boring, powerless, and ineffective because he understands its true potential. He fears believers who pray with passion, consistency, and authority. He fears people who refuse to surrender during difficult seasons. He fears worshippers who continue praising God despite pressure. He fears intercessors who stand in the gap for their families, communities, and future generations. Some breakthroughs happen suddenly after long seasons of prayer. Doors open unexpectedly. Healing manifests. Restoration arrives. Peace returns. Opportunities appear. Relationships heal. Direction becomes clear. Many people call these moments coincidence without realizing how many prayers prepared the way beforehand. Spiritual victory often develops quietly before it becomes publicly visible. Prayer also guards the mind against fear and confusion. In a world filled with constant noise, negativity, and uncertainty, prayer becomes a place of stability and clarity. The enemy uses chaos to weaken emotional strength, but prayer restores inner peace. It reminds people that God remains in control even when circumstances appear unstable. There are moments when prayer must become bold, not arrogant, but confident in God's authority. Fearful prayers produce fearful living, but faith-filled prayers release expectation. You cannot confront darkness while agreeing with defeat internally. There comes a point where believers must rise spiritually and declare that fear will no longer dominate their minds, oppression will no longer control their emotions, and hopelessness will no longer define their future. Every prayer spoken in faith is creating movement in the spirit realm. Every declaration of truth is weakening the enemy's influence. Every act of worship is shifting atmospheres around your life. Every moment spent seeking God is strengthening spiritual authority within you. Victory is not reserved for a select few. God responds to those who seek Him with sincerity, persistence, and faith. The enemy may fight intensely, but prayer releases a power greater than every spiritual attack, every chain, every fear, every stronghold, and every obstacle standing against your destiny.